Hello and welcome to the In the Money Players podcast. This is our show for Tuesday, May 23rd, Preakness Recap. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatal, back with you in the Brooklyn Bunker once again. It may have just been Preakness weekend, but clearly here with my Secretariat shirt on, already looking forward to the Belmont. But before we turn the page and get to that, and there is a part of me that wants to take a less said, the better approach about some of the stuff we saw on Saturday, but we're going to look backwards before we look forwards. And to do that with me, we bring in the man from InTheMoneyPodcast.com and the microphone at Sam Houston. He is Nick Tammaro. Nick, what's up, my man?
I'm doing great, my friend. Of course, you and I have never taken the less said, the better approach.
That's really true. That's really true. The Preakness, this was not the race that we wanted in terms of a horse that it felt like everybody on the In the Money team was behind. First Mission not being able to compete, and then we got the collateral form line early in the day from Arabian Lion, a race that was fast enough that you were already thinking, wow, these Preakness horses are going to have to do something to run a figure that's better than what we're guessing this guy gets. In the end, as we surmised on the emergency show, without First Mission in there, National Treasure able to walk the dog on the lead and get the job done with a 98 Beyer speed figure. Mage makes this move there in the mid stretch. He looks like he's coming to win the race. He kind of lugs in, finishes very flat. And then, of course, you had Blazing Sevens, who runs a much bigger race than I think most of us were thinking he was going to be able to, looking like he was going to win for a second. National Treasure, though, too good down on the fence. Give me your overall, we'll dive deep on this one, but let's start just with your overall impression of this year's Preakness.
I mean, it's, in the context of the day, it was hardly the most satisfying result. I think that
we'll go there thoroughly. We'll go there thoroughly on the next round of questions.
Right. The race itself was just sort of mind-boggling in terms of how it played out, because, I mean, I don't want to beat up on connections of a horse that legitimately was a 40 plus to 1 shot on paper. But why are you entering Coffee with Chris if you're going to rate? I mean, you have one opportunity to win the race, is to go to the lead. The horse has a ton of speed, got involved in a white hot pace last time out. And, I've spoken in the past about it, and it's something that I know people scoff at because it's really just an anecdotal kind of comment. But, in so many of these situations, John Velasquez gets the lead and everybody just genuflects. They don't push. And so, it's very difficult for a traditional type of race to take place. And, I opined on Saturday night that Luis Saez probably wouldn't have done that if he had been on First Mission and he had been in the race, and it would have at least made for a much more realistic type of at least not necessarily outcome, but, National Treasure would have had to earn it. And as it ended up, he didn't really, I mean, he finished first, but it's really hard to argue that he ran the best race. It also, so, you leave with as far as the race itself, you leave with a slightly bitter taste in your mouth. And wagering wise, I mean, I did so poorly on the day, it didn't matter. Really, I had no good opinions for the most part. So I was alive to National Treasure and Mage and stuff that really was not all that consequential. So, yeah, I mean, that's how I would say about it overall. Mage specifically, this was always going to be one of the potential dangers of them training him to get the additional distance, was that they really dulled his speed. And so not having as much speed as he had in prior starts, he was always going to need a little bit more help on the front end. And it ended up that he needed a little bit too much help.
Yeah, it looked a lot. And I'll give credit to Michael Domable for this observation. There was a little bit of orb going on here, in the sense of a horse that got a tremendous setup in the Derby and then had sort of the anti-setup.
Pause 1 second, Pete. There's somebody at my door.
Yes, yeah, dude. I'll just keep opining. People are used to this at this point. I have to let I get a FedEx package, whatever. Why make Craig have to edit? But yeah, so you go back to 2013. Orb gets the gigantic setup in the Derby, comes back in the Preakness. The opposite happens. The biggest difference here is in 2013, the market sort of went crazy for Orb. Orb was like handed the Triple Crown in a lot of people's minds based on the huge and impressive Derby run. And then you had a chance to, get a good price on Oxbow. Now, I messed it up. I didn't even bet that race correctly. But this time around, the obvious horse to take advantage of the pace situation, National Treasure, you were still taking less than 3-1. And meanwhile, you had Mage at 7-5, which I feel like before, during, and after, I feel like objectively Mage at 7-5 was almost bet of the year type stuff, because I just felt like there was not really a scenario in which he wasn't 50-50 to win the race, setup or no setup. I just, coming off the race that he ran, the figure he ran, it just seemed to me that 7-5 was ridiculous. And I went highly in that direction here, and it did not, obviously didn't work out. But it's one of those things where I feel like it's a mistake afterwards to say, oh, I bet too much on Mage, I made the wrong bet. I think I got 7-5 on a coin flip on heads, and we flipped the coin and it came up tails. This kind of stuff's going to happen, but I don't have any negative feeling about that after the fact. One other thing I wanted to give credit for, and this was in other interviews, but when we did our final answer show, which wasn't really a final answer show this year because we did it so early in the week, but when we did our Preakness Roundtable, I'll call it, John Piasek was very clear of having talked to Salzman and that whole camp that they weren't going to rate. And if you took that information literally, and sometimes connections say, oh, we're going to rate, and then they go hammer and tongs, and it's a little bit of a head fake. But if you take that literally, which you should have, because the horse they obviously grabbed and had no interest in showing speed, then once First Mission came out, I wouldn't have blamed anybody for saying National Treasure is their top pick or National Treasure is going to walk the dog on the lead. But for me, as such a speed figure guy as I am, and I'll probably came into the game this way, and I'll probably go out of it the same way. I'm not going to regret backing Mage at that price. And I truly believe if Mage had been as good as we thought he was, / had run his race, he runs National Treasure down even without the setup. I mean, this is a horse. I mean, in my mind, you got a horse that's running a 105 versus a horse that's maybe supposed to run a 95. It shouldn't even matter that much, but it turned out in this case it did. And another factor might be the 2 weeks. We'll get to that also. We got a lot to unpack in this show. But after the race, how do you feel about how you bet it? I was saying that, I still felt good. Objectively, I feel like 7-5 was a tremendous price on Mage.
Yeah, I agree with your rationale entirely. I think he was 50-50 to win it at worst. Probably with First Mission out, and so yeah, I don't blame you one bit. I think it was look, he was hovering around 9-5 or 2-1 for a while, and that looked like a gift from God. I guess it looked about as good as the gift we thought we got on First Mission in the future pool. But
we've been blamed, Nick. We've been blamed by some Sharpies who say, you guys talking about what a great bet you got on this horse in the future pool is the reason why the racing gods decided he had to scratch. Any comment on that?
I mean, I've been sort of rained on a sunny day before, so not all that shocking. Yeah, not all that.
That was very tongue in cheek, and it may have been Clay Sanders who said it. So it's
well, and he has reason to be upset. So yeah. But no, I agree with you. I thought Mage was very, very likely to win afterwards. And so you were saying, so John Piasek said that Salzman told him they were going to rate.
They were going to rate. That was on our roundtable show, and apparently that was elsewhere in the media as well. That, I mean, I don't get it either. I mean, I felt exactly the way that you felt. You go there with a long shot. You try to make it a true race. You hear your name called a couple of times. And if you're good enough, you hang around. I don't see what – I mean, I know I guess they said steady, but, I mean, it looked very deliberate. It looked like they should – I mean, it looked like very deliberate rating tactics and, trailing and making a big run for 5th in a 7-horse race. I don't see what that accomplishes.
No, and, in all likelihood, these are the kind of people that are never going to get back. And don't you at least want to – give yourself a puncher's chance. I mean, his chances of winning were single digits, low single digits to begin with, and rating, but some horsemen have this obsession with reminding everybody that their speed horse can rate. It's like, really, I don't necessarily care how you draw it up. I just want to see the result. So, generally speed horses need to be on the lead. And ironically, Bob Baffert is a guy who has won almost the entirety of the biggest races in his career by having his horses use speed. It's sort of an amazing phenomenon.
Yeah, exactly. He is the way his and the Pletcher runners typically run is there's no coincidence that they're so effective with letting speed horses actually show speed. Let's talk about the nasty bit. Having a meltdown, breaks down earlier in the card, and look, I think the real factor, why did this horse break down? Everybody wants me to throw Bob Baffert under the bus. It's obviously horrible optics. I think the main thing here is just horrific luck. I mean, the first team that puts on the Preakness, who run racing at Santa Anita, have shown that they can very effectively put every precaution into place. The numbers in Santa Anita in terms of equine fatalities are something the industry as a whole should be striving towards. I don't think it was an unsafe track. Baffert obviously going to face more scrutiny than most, given his checkered track record in these areas and the negative attention that he's drawn to the sport. I don't think he's trying to push the envelope on the Preakness undercard. I think it's bad luck, but the optics are so horrible. And to go from, the feeling of, I must have said it, early in the day, let's hope Mage wins and we can go to New York with a story. We can get people or racing fans. We can talk about the story we want to talk about. And then, the all horse players get, sort of cynical by nature. We're used to having sand kicked in our face. And after the having a meltdown tragedy, it just, you just got the feeling. I mean, everything was going in this direction of, well, isn't National Treasure just going to walk the dog on the lead and win? And, now we get the story and the national attention that we don't want to have. But, I'm also not going to come up here and point a finger at Baffert in this specific instance, because I really just think it's bad luck and we look terrible, and horse racing, gives itself a black eye once again. And it'd be so satisfying to play the blame game, but I don't see the point in it. And I don't think it's really fair.
Yeah, it is bad luck. I mean, look, it's obviously the game is under the microscope during this 5-week stretch. It'll sort of die down now, because really the only mainstream media attention we're getting is about things that are at this point that are negative. So we're only going to get coverage of breakdowns and doping, as Dan Wolkin likes to call it, when you use a topical ointment on a horse. That's doping. Then
that's the New York Times policy. We started talking about that with Jay. Even the overage of illegal medication is conflated with the service and Navarro stuff for better,
which is total insanity. Right, it's total insanity. What needs to be broadcast to the world is that the anti-doping policy went in place yesterday, and racing has taken an enormous amount of strides in the last 4 years to ensure the safety of humans and equines. And I thought Jerry Bailey and Randy Moss and Ahmed Fareed did a really good job in the immediate aftermath, covering it on NBC, explaining why a horse with a basically a useless ankle, unfortunately, is just not sustainable, and why things like that happen. And Jerry and Randy both opined that, obviously the goal is zero. You're never going to get to zero, but you want to get to as close to it as possible. And, you don't want to take the cop-out approach, which is, well, we have recognized it's going to happen. Hopefully it happens on the days where nobody's watching. I mean, let's be realistic. Nobody's watching 360 days a year in terms of mainstream attention, right? It's a niche sport in that respect. So most of the, if these things were to happen around the Derby as they did and on Preakness Day, then they're going to get an enormous amount of attention. But I also think that racing has to be very careful to stop apologizing for itself. And, it understands that what you have to do is focus on the things that you can control, which is that take a company like First Racing, as you said, that's put an enormous amount of protocols in. The state vet in Kentucky has obviously been very aggressive in terms of ensuring safety. There was a little bit of suspicion about what might have been going on with a certain trainer's horses at Churchill, so they ruled him off. These are things that are happening that did not happen years and years ago. So some real efforts are being made. And, I don't buy the doomsday stuff about, oh, this is racing's last stand and so on and so forth. I mean, this is way, 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 and I could say way for an hour, too big an industry for something like this to be taken down. But I do think there's attention that has to be paid to topics like the social license to operate, like you and Jay and Jessica covered. But it's also about putting forth a real effort to let people know that, we understand, we don't want things like this to happen. Obviously, we regret them happening on any type of stage, whether it's a big one or it's a Tuesday at Thistledown. And so we're going to do our very best to try and prevent it.
we'll see. And I want to get much deeper into some of what the Heist approach is going to be here. And I want to give voice to the other side as well, within the industry, who are, still sort of holding out against this national oversight. Though I personally believe at this point, there's got to be a way to do this where the industry rallies together and tries to defend itself properly and speak with a unified voice. I mean, we're at that point where racing is never going to go away, but racing could, and obviously New York, it's a separate conversation, but has been safeguarded to some degree. But California, it's tricky. There are some things that do. I don't have a full-on doomsday scenario, but I do think that we're at a crossroads, and I think that hopefully we're going to be able to continue, as has been done in California, to come up with new protocols nationally that reduce this as much as possible. And I agree. There's no scenario where you get to zero. Horses in a field will find ways to kill themselves. It's sort of the literal nature of the beast. But there's no doubt that racing can do better. And it was very, very disappointing to see that result earlier on the card. And then, it just doesn't look good to obviously have the same controversial face in the winner's circle after the big one. But, as I said before, it's not like I don't see causality here. I think it's kind of terrible coincidence at this stage. Let's talk about the one of the other major stories, I think, Nick, to come out of this year. Is this the last time we see the Preakness run back on 2 weeks? I mean, I feel like there's a lot of momentum in industry to stretch out this series. It was already dodgy to have not just the one horse come back from the Preakness, but so few others in there to fill up the starting gate. And then this is an overused term that I don't like using, but boy, it looked like Mage kind of bounced to me. It just didn't seem like the same horse. And I know the difference in pace scenarios was part of it, and maybe that makes up half the distance, but it doesn't help the case of run it back in 2 weeks to see that kind of performance from your Derby winner. And we're at a point where single data points like that might influence things. Do you think there's any chance they'll make the change as soon as next year?
I mean, I think a lot of things are going to happen with Maryland racing over the course of the next 6 months, and that's probably going to contribute to it, especially with this Maryland Horse Racing Authority coming into play. So, quite honestly, Pete, my issue with them moving the date is I don't think it'll change a number of the you move it back 2 weeks. I don't think it's going to stimulate Todd Pletcher and Brad Cox to run their horses back. I think what you're going to get is a new date with the same horses in it. And clearly a few things need to happen that need to be looked at from a global perspective in the industry. One thing I've been an advocate for, and I know this might not make a lot of people happy that run races prior to the Kentucky Derby, is that we have to take a long look at whether any of those races should be grade ones. Yep. And if none of those are grade ones, then the Preakness immediately has more meaning, yep. And I mean 2-year-old races too. And so that's going to be hard on a lot of, we're talking a serious amount of races, but if we want to treat the Triple Crown as something sacred, which, let's be realistic, there are a few things in racing that really work. Yep. The Triple Crown works. I mean, we get a lot of people to the racetrack. We get a lot of attention.
Look at the money bet. Does the Preakness move back 2 weeks, get the incredibly good handle that they got? That's my biggest fear with, I get moving it will improve the quality of these races standpoint, but there's knock-on effects here.
Right. And the other thing is, I mean, we have to be realistic about the Preakness undercard. We're talking about a bunch of $100,000 races. I mean, their allowance races in Kentucky run for more money than that. So, I mean, these are races that over the years have taken purse cuts. And if we think that we're going to get some star-studded undercard made up of races with $100,000 purse, it's just not going to happen. And I'm not doing that to slight Maryland racing at all, but it's realistic. I mean, you're not going to run in the Maryland turf sprint when you can wait 3 weeks and run in the Jaipur, and it's a grade one and the purse is 4 times as large, right? And you're not going to run in the Allaire Dupont Distaff when you can run in the Ogden Phipps. So, that's just part of the reality. I mean, it's a wild idea that would probably never work, but I saw Craig Milkowski from Timeform put on Twitter, he thinks the Preakness should be run on the first Saturday in April. Now, I think you'd have a quite a few people in a boardroom on the east side of Louisville a little upset about that. But
Yeah.
the thing
That'll never happen.
well, the thing you come back to is the Derby, right? The Derby's always going to be popular no matter what. It not being in sequence is not really the most ideal set of circumstances, but you start to, if you go the first Saturday in May Derby, first Saturday in June Preakness, first Saturday in July Belmont, well, what does that do to Saratoga, right? And NYRA is not going to allow their the biggest items on NYRA's agenda each year are the Belmont and Saratoga, and that would jeopardize both. So I just don't think that's happening. And I don't, I'll be honest, Pete, some of this has to fall on the horseman. And one of the things that I don't understand is that you train your horse for the Derby. To me, it would be implicit that you've trained them for the Triple Crown. Because if you win the Derby, you're not going to run in the Preakness. I mean, I saw Larry Ravelli say that about Two Phils, and I have respect for Larry Ravelli as a successful horseman. And he even said, if we had won the Derby, I might not have run in the Preakness. Like, really? I mean, are we at a point where the Preakness is that irrelevant to horsemen? Because they could be reminded that the majority of 3-year-old champions in the 21st century have won the Preakness.
Yep.
It's still a very, very important race. It's a very meaningful race. And, to treat it like it's some afterthought, to think that horse skipped the Preakness and is going to run next in the Matt Win is just, it's mind-boggling. But it tells you that spacing and timing and things like that have really overhauled tradition.
I would love to see a meeting with horsemen, the biggest horsemen. The one benefit of having so much consolidation in terms of training big horses going with big trainers is you could really get a group together that could speak with the voice of that perspective, with important executives from First, with important executives from NYRA, with somebody, and then you got to get somebody to represent the television interest too, because obviously nothing can happen without the television interest. And I'd like to see if there isn't some way that could benefit. There's a scenario where everyone could benefit, but it's going to involve some major rejiggering. I'm totally with you on, I feel like a race that's a prep for another race where there's other races for the same division that are huge on the same weekend. Those races should not be grade ones. I totally get that. You're never going to work. The 2-year-old grade one thing will never, that isn't going to change.
Never going to happen.
It's such a, that one I can't see, but I could see some scenarios with a reduction of other grade one opportunities, an increase in purse for a race like the Preakness, maybe some sort of revamping of the undercard. It's the kind of situation where everybody would have to give something, but I think the sport as a whole could come out better. And everyone involved is a reasonable person. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe maybe this meeting happens and it comes to an impasse and we get in a situation where people act unilaterally and the chips fall where they may. But boy, wouldn't it be great if that wasn't the way it worked out? I mean, it's a small enough group of smart enough people that it feels like there should be an answer here that benefits everybody. We'll see if that in fact ends up being the case or not. Let's get back to some racing, Nick, because we don't have all the time in the world here. Oh, well, first thing is let's take a look forward to the Belmont, because, boy, if everybody shows up who might show up, we could actually have a hell of a race. What do you think the odds are that we'll see some of these horses who are being pointed? Actually, maybe I'll start with this question, because this is a horse who's quite right now listed as possible for the Belmont Stakes. Would Arabian Lion have won the Preakness on Saturday? Now, I know, put aside the idea that it's the same trainer and Bob Baffert as the winner, and team tactics and whatnot. Just in terms of ability, how do you think Arabian Lion would have looked in the Preakness?
I think he's an improving horse. I think he would have been dangerous, no doubt about it. The difference between he and National Treasure is that he did have to go quite a bit faster early. He did take a mid-race challenge that really, moved him forward quite a bit, whereas National Treasure really didn't feel any heat until the stretch. So I thought it was a strong performance. I saw Bob Baffert. It's always hard to read exactly what Baffert is getting at, but he mentioned that Arabian Lion might be a Woody Stevens horse for him. So I think I get the vibe that National Treasure is probably going to run in the Belmont. And if Arabian Lion were to go there, Arabian Lion's performance on Saturday was very solid. I continue to laugh at everybody including me, who confuses him in Arabian Night. So it's going to be really funny when they're both in the gate together at some point, which could happen at Saratoga. So, yeah, I think that would be my thought. And so to get to your Belmont point, since we kind of covered Arabian Lion, we're looking right now potentially at Forte and 2 to 3 other Pletcher horses, Hit Show and Angel of Empire, National Treasure, potentially Reincarnate. And, you could then add in Peter Pan winner Arcangelo potentially, because I still can't imagine Jenna Antonucci is going to skip a race like this, even if they have to supplement for 50,000. And, just kind of a smattering of others that had been mentioned over time. But, if that's the core group, that feels like that's a very, very solid race. And look, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of intrigue alone just with Forte. Forte were to win the Belmont Stakes. I mean, now he's a clear leader in the clubhouse for the Eclipse Award. It'll generally be settled in the fall anyway, the summer and fall. But yeah, he'll be so ahead of the game, and you have it's sort of a revenge plot for Todd Pletcher and Michael Poli, if you will, with what happened in Kentucky, and then being on the vets list for the Preakness. So yeah, it would be kind of a funny and interesting way to end the sequence.
Red Route 1, I think you mentioned, is listed as probable. Sun Thunder, Tapatrice listed as probable. There's a lot of intrigue. There are some really good storylines. So here's my question about it. I keep harping on Arabian Lion, but once again on the Timeform US pace figures, he's uplining at the end. This idea that he needs that he can't see out the distance. I'm not sure how backed up it is by what we've seen on the track, but obviously Baffert knows more than me. So if they decide to cut back, you'd have to think that's where he goes.
I think what it might be is that Baffert feels National Treasure is a little bit more equipped to go to the Belmont than Arabian Lion is. But I could see him, using Arabian Lion in a, deputizing, so to speak, for National Treasure if something were to come up.
Michelle Yu loved National Treasure as for the Belmont, and that's why she picked him in our Derby draft. She is just wiping the floor with us at this point.
Yeah, she won by a mile.
Yeah, she's got us. I don't think there's any result in the Belmont.
I've registered 0 points.
Michelle having a very good run in that particular contest. Let's talk. What do we want to talk next? Should we talk a little Black Eyed Susan? That was I think a race worth pausing on. Taxed, getting the job done of sort of franking that fantasy form that we've had questions about. The figure nothing to write home about in a 90, but a good effort, and a division that's sort of yet to produce any sort of absolutely wild speed figures. Tax looks like a potential player in the division going forward, I would say.
She does, and it's nice to see, the little guy. And Randy Morse is not a little guy. He's had a lot of good horses over the years, but it's been a while since he had a particularly good horse. But it's nice to see a horseman like him with a good horse. And Tax is one that you mentioned had been claimed, and so that's still something that. Yeah, it happens, right? And she was a horse that's always trained well, and she ran very well. The disappointment in the race was Feza, who ran very poorly, had no excuse whatsoever, and just doesn't look like the horse that we thought she might be based on some of that California form. So, the 3-year-old filly division just feels like as much of a grab bag as you're going to get. I hope that the gate is packed in the Acorn, which is now on Belmont Eve, because the field should be big there. I don't know if Randy Morse would bring Tax back that quickly, but I would assume that a lot of the Kentucky Oaks alumna, so to speak, would be in there, and you'd see maybe Wet Paint square off with. Actually, that's funny. My reaction to this race, and maybe it was not necessarily the right one. I still think Wet Paint's the best 3-year-old filly, and I say that because I think that she was forced into a scenario. I guess what I'm trying to say is that Wet Paint is going to have to get a little bit better, but I still think she's the best 3-year-old filly. And I say that because the Oaks was the first time she had to expend a little bit of energy early. If she's going to win major dirt races around 2 turns, she's going to have to expend a little bit more energy early. What will also happen between now and August is that other 3-year-old fillies are going to get better that are on the, mainly in the weeds, so to speak. Chad Brown had a really nice Judmont horse win on Thursday or Friday at Belmont, I think Thursday, who looks like she could be a real player in the division, a little bit later on in the year. So, there's going to be new challenges, but we'll see what happens at Belmont.
Yeah, I definitely think that race, and we don't have a great list of probables for it yet. I don't think. I'm not finding it anyway.
Yeah, it's early.
Yeah, but we'll see what happens. But that certainly has the potential. That, as you mentioned, just an incredibly open division.
Yeah.
Let's close sort of where we began, looking back at the Preakness, and I just want to ask you about predictions for Mage. I mean, is this a horse who, you know, as much as he'd accomplished in a shorter period of time, was entitled to a bit of regression and is going to rest up and come back a monster for the fall? Or is he a horse that, you know, a little bit more Orb-like, that took advantage, had picked a great day to have the best day of his life, and might be, you know, not knocking around the top of the division the rest of the way?
Yeah, I'd like to think he's going to be a solid back half of the year 3-year-old. You know, the thing that you always run the risk of is that they're gonna sideline him for a bit, and you know he's going to show them that he might have expended a little bit too much energy early in the year. I hope that's not the case. So I hope that they're able to, you know, to maybe get him back to the Jim Dandy or something like that. He's still lightly raced. He's still a horse with a lot of talent. You know, I don't think it's bounce. I'm a speed figure guy, but I'm not a bounce guy. I think he got a setup in the Derby, and I think he didn't in the Preakness. And you know that explains so many big figures can be attributed to something, whether it's the surface, the bias, the pace, you know, something like that. And I think you can attribute his last 2 figures to something very clear: the pace. It was just up to that. And so, you know, I don't think that he lost anything in defeat terribly much. But I do. I mean, I shouldn't say he didn't lose anything. He lost a little bit of luster, but he still has an opportunity. Everything that he wants to do is still out there. And, you know, let's be honest, the handicap division, the older handicap division is still very much up in the air. So we're going to see a lot of these 3-year-olds later in the season have an opportunity to supplant some of the older horses as some of the best around. And, you know, hopefully we'll get an opportunity to see everybody square off in November at Santa Anita.
One other for you before I let you get out of here. That is a horse that looked like a serious contender, or looks now like a serious contender for the Breeders' Cup Sprint, in Straight No Chaser. I know you were not a believer going in. Are you a believer coming out?
Yeah, I gave PTF and JK a hard time about him being their best bet of the day, just because I thought his last figure was inflated with a slow pace and this and that. Boy, he shut me up in a hurry. He was really good. He was really, really good. I mean, I don't know. You know, he seems like a horse I guess we'll see probably in the Bing and some races out west, being with Dan Blacker. But, you know, God, part of me was like, man, I hope this horse could run back in the True North. I doubt he'll run back in 3 weeks. But he was really, really good. So, yeah, definite. You know, this might be the sprinter we've been waiting for in a lot of ways. And I've shortchanged Sibelius a lot of times when it comes to the sprint division, because he's the best sprinter out there. We'll see him back in the True North. So, but still, Straight No Chaser was very, very good. 107 Buyer speed figure, I believe, in a near track record performance. So,
talking about him also makes me think of another difference when I was talking about how like sort of the worm was turning and you started to get this bad feeling. Well, I started to get this bad feeling about how the Preakness was going to go. The rail, which had looked lousy on Friday, clearly had, I don't want to say flipped, like it was definitely a positive, but it sure wasn't a negative on Saturday. And that did, and I'm not taking anything away from Straight No Chaser, but I was thinking maybe you might point to that rail as part of the reason why he was able to be so dominant.
I mean, only because I have no concrete evidence to back up that the rail might have gotten good. I still haven't even watched the Arabian race, so maybe there was a good inside performance in there. But you know, just because you had seen 20 odd dirt races roughly up to that point that had all been run with what looked like an outside track profile, it'd be hard to you're really gonna have to die on the hill of the rail got good during the track maintenance period with the turf race prior.
All right. Well, Straight No Chaser, another one, be exciting to follow going through. Appreciate you coming on here, Nick. We've got more show. If you're listening, this will wrap the YouTube segment. Go check us out over at inthemoneypodcast.com, In the Money Media, wherever you get your shows. We remind you to rate, review, and subscribe. Drop a note in the comments as well. Let us know what you think of any of this stuff. Is Straight No Chaser going to win the Breeders' Cup Sprint? Who's going to be our 3-year-old champion? Will Mage bounce back? Is National Treasure the real deal? Etc., etc. Let us know what you think in the comments. We appreciate you, and we'll be back right after this.